Welcome, everybody. So, my name is Brittany. I work for Detroit Bird Alliance. We're excited to offer this webinar in partnership with MSU Extension. And I'm going to go ahead and toss over the podium over to Lindsey. So, if you want to do kind of a formal introduction, and then from there, we'll give it a few more minutes.
Sure. So yes, I'm Lindsey and I work with MSU Extension. I am the consumer horticulture educator for Wayne County. While I'm just getting started, if folks are just coming in, if you can take the demographic survey while I introduce myself, I'd really appreciate it. It's just a few questions. So since I work for Michigan State University Extension, we are partially federally funded. And because we have that federal money, we always have to do demographic surveys when we do public programs to make sure that we are reaching a wide audience. We're serving every American. So I always put up this survey. There's a link in the chat. And yeah, if you can just take it really quick, you can also check the boxes that say that you don't want to share information. That's fine. And then we'll keep going. Always takes me a second to figure out which screen I want to be looking at. Okay, so Michigan State University is an affirmative action equal opportunity employer. Michigan State University Extension programs and materials are open to all without regard to race, color, national origin, sex, gender, gender identity, religion, age, height, weight, disability, political beliefs, sexual orientation, marital status, family status, or veteran status. And so this poster explains that if you feel like you have been discriminated against by Michigan State University, there is a path for you to file a complaint. So if you ever feel that way, know that there is resources for you. And that's why I share this. I always share this poster.
Hey, Lindsey, just so you know,
Yes.
You're
seeing a different screen?
Yes, your screen is pinned to the top left corner. I'm
going to stop sharing.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm going to reshare.
Yeah,
let's see. I need to go to Zoom. And then I have too many tabs open. I'm sorry, people. Okay. Share my screen. Go back to my slideshow. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now you can see it.
Yes, we're all set.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So now I have to go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So this is Harmony in the Habitat, Birds and Native Plants for Your Backyard. So I only have less than an hour, right, to cover a lot. So there's no way I can cover everything, but hopefully I'll get you started. So I'm going to talk about why native plants, what are native plants, how do we go about choosing native plants, how do we design with them, and what resources are there to learn more. And it's funny, there we go. Okay, just futzing with my page setup. So why native plants? First of all, they're beautiful. They're just absolutely stunning, or they can be. You can do these amazing, very simple combinations. These are ostrich fern and Ansonia. It's just stunning. They support insects. And this is really important because most plant-eating insects can only eat species with which they've co-evolved. A lot of plants have defense chemicals in their tissues that ward off insects. So the indigenous insects can't eat a given plant unless the insect has developed the adaptations to circumvent those defenses. So not only do non-native plants smell and taste different, but some of them are toxic to our native insects. And if you've been reading the news for the past several years, they keep talking about, the insect apocalypse, how our insect numbers are just decreasing rapidly. So native plants are really important for insects. They support other invertebrates like spiders, and crustaceans and things like that. They're really vital, and I'll come back to spiders in a little bit. And then of course, we all love birds here, so they support birds. And birds are tied very closely to insects, fruit, and seeds. So native plants provide the food for the invertebrates, like insects, like this caterpillar. The invertebrates are food for birds and mammals. So it's all part of this life cycle. So native plants create wildlife habitat as well, a place for invertebrates, birds, mammals, all to live, raise their young, and hide. And so urbanization and industrialization has really fragmented habitat, making it hard for our native animals to live, feed themselves, reproduce. For birds, they often fly far or long distances during migration. They need places to stop and rest, and also to raise their young. So this information is taken from Doug Tallamy at the University of Delaware. So he did one study, and I know Doug Tallamy is controversial, but he did one study and they found that one chickadee family fed their babies 350 to 560 caterpillars every day. So that's 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise one family of baby birds. And those caterpillars need something to eat, and those are typically our native trees, shrubs, and perennials. If you don't have those plants for those caterpillars to eat, you won't have the chickadees. In late summer and fall, a lot of birds switch to eating berries before migration. They need a lot of fat and carbohydrates to migrate south into Central America. And so if they don't have that food, they can't make that journey. They don't have the energy for that flight. And they also won't stop in your yard if you don't have food or hiding places or water. Water is actually really important. So native plants, they are locally adapted to thrive in our soils and our weather conditions. They support our soil ecosystems, and they can help reduce erosion and filter water. And once they're established, they should need zero input from us in terms of watering or fertilizing. That's a should. And that's also once established, and that's a key distinction. So that doesn't mean that native plants don't need any maintenance or care. It doesn't mean that you can just walk away from your garden. But if they thrive in the wild, in the woods, in the fields, with no human intervention, and they have for centuries, they should thrive in your garden. If you're putting the right plant in the right place, it should thrive. But at the same time, you need to understand your garden, your soil conditions, how much light you have, all of those components. That's how, once you get to know your garden, your yard, then these things are true. Then you can put the right plant in the right place. And it's okay if plants die. That's absolutely fine. If you're a longtime gardener, you've killed many plants. When you kill a native plant, you've planted it, you've watered it, well, it gets established. If it doesn't thrive, that just means that it wasn't suited for that spot. And you can find something else that's better adapted for that location. So I'm going to go through some definitions, and I'm going to try and go through this quickly. It's not the most fun part. So invasive is a term that we hear a lot. And so I just wanted to clarify this word. So this is taken from the state of Michigan. An invasive species is one that is not native and whose introduction causes harm. And that causes harm is really key. Or it's likely to cause harm to Michigan's economy, environment, or human health. Invasive species cause harm when they outcompete native species by reproducing and spreading rapidly in areas where they have no natural predators and change the balance of the ecosystem we rely on. And this is a definition from the state, and the state is who designates, the federal government can designate something as invasive, and then the state can designate something as invasive, and then a local municipality might be able to do that as well. It depends upon which state you live in, and enabling legislation. That's a whole different presentation. But the state of Michigan, unfortunately, is reluctant to label things as invasive. They often wait until they have caused harm. We're reactive rather than proactive, and that's a little frustrating. But at Michigan State University, we use the term invasive when it is designated or classified by the state. Just because it's aggressive in your garden does not mean it's invasive. It has to be classified. And native plants cannot be invasive. But I'll explain what native is in a minute. Okay, so non-native is, you hear that all the time. What does it mean? So it can mean a plant not indigenous or not native to North America. It can mean a plant not indigenous to the Great Lakes region. or to Michigan, or to the local ecoregion. Not native is really your definition. Some people say all of North America. Some people are much more specific, and that's really up to you to decide what it means to you and your garden. Many non-native species in Michigan, including fruits, vegetables, field crops, livestock, they're important to our economy and lifestyle. Just because it's not native doesn't mean it's harmful. So I always tell people I'm not a purist. For one thing, we all need to eat, and our vegetables are not native. So, I just talked about what's not native. So what is native? Again, this is a definition you have to make for yourself. It could be a plant that's indigenous to North America, making it more specific, a plant indigenous to the Great Lakes region, or to Michigan, or pulling it even closer, plant indigenous to the local ecoregion, or say your county. So a couple examples, like the Colorado blue spruce, native to North America. It does not thrive in Michigan. You've probably seen them. They're dying everywhere right now from a disease, and that is exacerbated by the fact that they don't like our climate and soils. A plant indigenous to the Great Lakes region, but not necessarily to Michigan, is the purple coneflower. Talk more about that later. A white pine, definitely native to Michigan, or jack pine, native to Michigan, not native to Wayne County. Especially jack pine does not like our soils here in Southeast Michigan. So again, it's understanding just because it's native to the state doesn't mean it's native to where you live in the state. Something like wild bergamot or Monarda fistulosa is native across the state. So again, you kind of decide how you define native for yourself and your garden. So a nativar is a selection of a native plant chosen for special characteristics such as size, color, or flower shape. They're often clones. So nativars are often controversial. They aren't necessarily bad, but you need to understand that because they're clones, there's no genetic variation or very little between different like individual plants. So if you were to go to a big box store and buy a nativar, say of echinacea, every single pot is going to be a clone of the original one that a horticulturist found and reproduced. So sometimes they're weak plants. They don't have the best vigor because they've been selected for their color or their flower shape, something like that. So the important thing to know, though, is that sometimes the color of the leaf is different than the species, or there are multiple petals. The flower shape has changed, and that's why humans have selected it. But sometimes those changes, the leaf color change in particular, or the flower shape change, can make that plant inedible or unattractive to our native insects. So sometimes it takes away kind of its ecological benefit. And sometimes the flowers are sterile, so they might not produce any nectar that our pollinators or birds would like to use. So that's important to know. So if you're kind of when in doubt, go with a straight species. So, and then wildflowers. I hear wildflowers all the time. Wildflowers typically aren't native. If you buy that package of seeds at a store and it says wildflowers, they're probably Eurasian annual flowers that are just pretty. So why is this important? I actually took this picture in the parking lot of my office this afternoon. So backyards are really important for birds' needs. They need places that they can stop over when they're migrating. They need places where they can rear their young. They need food and they need cover so that they can maintain their health. This is a picture of a non-native honeysuckle. They're the shrubby honeysuckles. I don't know which one this is yet because it hasn't leafed out or flowered. But they're considered an ecological trap for nesting birds. So they leaf out earlier than our native shrubs. And this is happening right now. Like I said, I took this picture today. You can, see that there's everything else is kind of brown. Nothing's leafing out. And here is the shrub covered in these new leaves. Or they're not fully leafed out, but they're working on it. And so birds like cardinals, they get a false sense of security, and they decide to nest there. And these plants are lower to the ground, and my understanding is also their branching structure makes it easier for predators to get to nests. But the other thing is that this type of honeysuckle, its fruit has really poor nutritional value. It's high in sugar, low in protein, and low in antioxidants. So people who do research on this kind of thing describe it as junk food for birds. But because because it leaves out early, these birds are trapped into thinking it's good. And that's really unfortunate. So invasive species, this one is not listed in Michigan, but it should be. They can be really detrimental to our bird populations. Autumn olive is also similar. It has a fruit that's really high in sugar. Again, it's kind of like junk food. And, it just doesn't supply birds with the energy they need to sustain themselves, especially when it comes to migration, because, these fruit in the late summer kind of fall, and that's when birds are migrating through. It's detrimental to their health. And the studies have been done. So there's a researcher at Michigan State University, and she's done studies that show that our native birds prefer native fruit from native plants. So when we remove these, we open up the opportunity for, birds to come in, eat better food, and be healthier. So this is actually a screenshot of from one of her, Dr. Jen Owen, her a presentation that her researchers have put together. And this information is taken from a publication that I'll share at the end. But these are some plants that grow native in Michigan, and they're really valuable to birds. So she works at the Corey Marsh Ecological Research Station. It's closer to Lansing. And she looks at what birds eat and the nutritional value of what they eat. And so again, she's proven that birds prefer berries from native plants when they are available. Something to think about, though, if you read her research, is that she studied birds and berries from shrubs. She hasn't really looked at seeds from native plants or at birds and insects. So, that's just another layer of research that needs to be done. And then also when you're looking at like this illustration and other research, again, it's important to note that she's studying at a marsh, and most of us don't have backyards that are marshes. So that means our backyards are very different from where she's studying. So when you look at these plants and you think, oh, I want that for my backyard, it's important to do some more research on your own to understand if that plant will thrive in your backyard. The soil near Lansing and at this research station is going to be very different than what's in Wayne County or in Kent County. So again, make a list of plants that look interesting to you, then dig a little bit deeper to understand if they fit in your yard. So having said that, I don't want to give any direct recommendations of plants tonight because everybody's yard or garden is a special case. So I'm going to try and help you think through how to start incorporating native plants into your yard or garden, but I'm not going to give specific recommendations. Okay, so getting started. So you've decided you want to plant a native plant garden, or you want to restore a portion of your property. How do you get started? So as you go through this process, think about birds and their annual cycle. They migrate back to Michigan in the spring, or maybe they're passing through, migrating somewhere else. There's a breeding time when they need a lot of food for themselves and the chicks or the baby birds in the nest, and that's generally insects. Migration, where maybe they are eating more berries and seeds because they need more fat. And then think about winter protection and food during the winter. So how can you support them throughout the whole year? Okay, so my main suggestion is always start small. And then aim for improvement, not for perfection. So really adjust your expectation. It's better to start small and be successful then get overwhelmed and just give up. So start small. And the popular quote, don't let perfection be the enemy of good, or don't let the perfection be the enemy of progress. Really remember that and lean into it. You do not have to have a purely native garden. There's nothing wrong with having a mix of native plants and non-native plants. However, you do need to have enough food for insects and birds. So you need to have a number of native plants. One single native plant's not going to make a bird stick around and make a home in your yard. You need enough plants to create food, and like I said, shelter. But of course, there's nothing wrong with having birds pass through. So think about what you want, start small, aim for improvement. This is actually a picture of my front yard. It's from, I think, 2022, when I killed the grass on the left side, because I was starting small. I just wanted to do one side of the front yard and then I would switch to the other. Get to know your ecoregion, and then search for plants native to your ecoregion or your county. So this is a picture from the EPA, or sorry, a drawing or diagram from the EPA, and it shows level 3 and 4 ecoregions in Michigan. I don't expect you to understand this, and I can't go into great detail about it, but what I wanted you to see is just how diverse Michigan is. And that kind of, I'm hoping that you understand, again, that what is native is really depends upon where you live. It's not just the whole state. We have these different soils and then different climates or microclimates, just different growing conditions all over the state. And that informs what plants grow there. Some grow completely across the state. They're very easy to grow plants, and others are much more specific. And then, of course, that's one reason why, like, you go to the west side of the state to see the Kirtland's warbler. It's not in Wayne County because the trees that they thrive in do not do well in Wayne County. So North America is actually divided into 15 broad ecological regions. And then those are broken down into level 2, which are 50 ecological regions, and then broken down again more into 182 level 3 ecoregions. And so this map shows part of it. And if anybody's interested, I can share a link to the EPA website where you can see this. You can also plant by county, and sometimes that's useful, and I did that, so I'll explain that later. Okay, so you've decided that you're going to start small. You're going to adjust your expectations. You start looking at your ecoregion, or maybe you just decide to go with your county because that's easiest, you know, what's native there or what the climate is. You start making a list of plants, and then you need to design and conceptualize. So what I suggest is to really think about, what do you want from this garden, and what are your needs, and who or what are you trying to serve? So, you know, the garden, you might want a place to learn. You might want a place of respite at the end of the day. Your needs might be really low cost or low maintenance, or you have a dog and you need your dog to be able to run around. Think about what your needs are. And then who or what are you trying to serve? Maybe it's just you, maybe it's the birds, you know, maybe you have kids. So think about who you're trying to benefit with this garden. And it might be, if you're really a birder, maybe there's a specific bird you're trying to attract, or maybe it's, or kind of like warblers, it's a wide range of birds, or you just want native plants because they're beautiful. And so when you are making your list and you're thinking about these things, also don't forget to include a mix of plants. This is really important. We talk about layering the landscape. And so you need trees, shrubs, grasses, or sedges, and forbs, which are the broadleaf plants that, generally speaking, flower. What we think of in terms of annuals and perennials, they're generally forbs. So this is important to think about because birds need all of those kind of, like I said, layers or levels in the landscape. Sometimes you don't have a big enough yard to do this, but, you know, thinking about it, maybe you can incorporate a couple layers, and maybe your neighbor's tree I have a huge maple tree in a neighbor's yard. So that kind of serves as that huge tree, that upper canopy level. And then maybe I put in shrubs in my backyard, that's a lower level. And then I bring them down even closer to the ground with grasses and forbs. So just, think about having this mix if you can fit it into your yard. So because trees and shrubs provide nesting places as well as shelter. If they're native, they should provide the insects for birds to eat. And trees and shrubs usually produce fruit or nuts that birds can eat. And they also provide structure to your design. Grasses and sedges are also important to insects. Some do eat their leaves and others burrow and nest at their base. And then, of course, the forbs, the broadleaf plants, they provide flowers. So that's nectar and maybe seeds and things like that for birds. And then also nectar for bees and butterflies, things like that, and hummingbirds. So then your next step is to remove the undesirable plants. And buy plants or seeds and then plant. So removing undesirable plants is controversial, right? Kill your lawn, remove the invasive species. So how do you do that? And that's probably the hardest question. And again, that's something that you just have to decide on your own. I will use herbicide. A lot of people think that that is a terrible thing and they don't agree with that. And so that's my personal decision based on what I understand. But you can also use wood chips and put them really deep to smother a lawn. You can also use you can solarize using plastic. Plastic on its own is problematic. You can also end up killing microbes in the soil. And now, with the more information coming out about PFAS, cardboard, maybe we don't want to use especially treated cardboard. So it's a challenge to remove undesirable plants. You don't necessarily want to use a sod cutter because that brings up a whole bunch of seeds that have been dormant. And so you often end up with a weedy mess. But so you want to kill the plants that are there or remove them, the lawn or the shrubs. And you really want to get them completely gone because otherwise you're going to be fighting them for years to come. Trees and shrubs can be removed, cut down, dug out. Sometimes goats can also help by eating them over and over again. But again, you really want to make sure that they're gone before you start. And buying seeds or plants and planting, those are the easy parts. So this is all kind of planning, thinking about these different steps. Watering and establishing your plants is really important. Don't underestimate this. And maintaining is probably the most important part. So you need to help your plants get established. And that might take a few weeks, or it might take years if it's a tree. Maintenance is also really important because you can't just walk away from your garden. Native plants, even though they might thrive without any extra water, no fertilizer, things like that, invasive species are going to move in and they are going to smother your native plants. So the garden needs constant maintenance. It needs to be weeded to remove that competition. Leave the leaves has been really popular in the past year or so. And I completely advocate for leaving the leaves if you can. Leaves are nature's mulch. They provide hiding places for invertebrates, nesting material for birds. If you've been watching the birds in your backyard, you might see them picking up stuff, these past couple of weeks. The stems might have bees living in them. Native bees will sometimes lay eggs in those hollow stems. And then dead trees and stumps attract insects and woodpeckers. So if you can, leave the leaves. Again, this is not about perfection. Not only not having the most perfect formal garden, but also if you can't leave the leaves because of your neighbors, because of where you live, that's okay. Maybe leave them somewhere else. It's a balance. Oh, so this is a little video. Let's see if I can make it play. This is a garden outside my office, and I was really happy because I left all these stems up over the winter, and it worked. I believe this is a fox sparrow. I could be wrong. It's a little brown bird, And, it was just really nice to see it out there in the winter doing exactly what I wanted it to do, which is eating those seeds from some rudbeckia that I'd left. So let's apply some of the information I've already shared. And I'm going to go really quickly through a garden that I created and use it as an example. So this is my office, the building that houses my office. And so this is what it looked like in 2022. Just grass. And this is by the staff entrance. And so I decided to create a smart habitat garden there. I wanted to be a demonstration garden. So this is my why, right? And I said, when you're creating a garden, think about your why too. So I wanted a demonstration garden for homeowners. I wanted someplace where people could learn. My building has a bunch of medical offices in it, as well as Homeland Security, 911 dispatch. So I wanted a place for people who have high stress jobs to find respite. I also wanted habitat, and I wanted less energy input or chemical input than the lawn that was already there. So then I started thinking about this. So I wanted plants native to Michigan, and I really wanted Wayne County. I wanted low water need, low maintenance. I wanted habitat for invertebrates and birds. I also wanted different textures, colors, and shapes. And then I needed plants that I could find easily. I didn't want to be searching high and low or pay a bunch of money for rare plants. And then I wanted things that grew fast. And I also seeded in annuals that would be they're non-native annuals that I decided I would remove in the future, but I just wanted color fast because this is a public site. And I crammed in a bunch of plants. And so again, that ease of purchase and cost was important because the more plants you have, the fewer weeds you have. If the desirable plants can shade the ground and outcompete the weeds, that's perfect. And then also masses of plants provide coverage and safety for birds. So this became my plant list. I said I wanted plants native to Wayne County, and I made a few mistakes, or I made some decisions. I really like anise hyssop, and so I decided to plant that. The birds love the seeds, so that's why I included it. Echinacea purpurea, I didn't realize that when I chose that plant that it wasn't native to Wayne County. I put in little blue stem, I wanted a grass, and the grass I originally picked, I was advised would seed too much and become too weedy, so I went with little blue stem instead. And then in my design, I am not a very artistic person, I'm much more mathematical. So I did this technique of planting in blocks. Some people call it modular planting. There's a very distinct row of butterfly weed, because monarch butterflies have a harder time seeing them if they're integrated in with all the other plants. So it's kind of a row. And then these classic design principles, taller in the back, middle height in the middle, and lower in front. I didn't want anything to obstruct the path, and I can show you I messed up on that. And I wanted some spreaders and some self-sowers. And like I said, then I had some non-natives. So this was my design. This is a piece of graph paper, and each square is 1 foot by 1 foot. And it just made it easy for me to understand where I was putting things, and I knew I could give this to a volunteer. And I did have a key that went with this, but I could give it to a volunteer and they could know exactly what to plant. But it was a lot of plants, but you can see there's a lot of repetition. I didn't want a huge plant list because that makes it more expensive if you can buy in bulk rather than ones. It's less expensive. So this was June 15th. Remember last summer we had a terrible drought. I planted right in the middle of it, and it was very hard to keep this watered, but that's what it looked like on June 15th. You can see how it's on a grid. So this was July 10th. Things started to take off. And this is a mix of, you can see the Echinacea purpurea, and then the Liatris are kind of the spiky flowers that are not yet blooming. The blue is larkspur, which is not native. And then the yellow kind of daisy-like flower that's native to the plains. It's called Plains coreopsis. So this was July 18th. You can see it's starting to fill in. And then this was August. So it had really taken off with the rain and just getting established and looked great. I wish you could see how many butterflies and wasps and things like that were visiting this garden. And this was August 4th. This is August 23rd. Again, I kind of messed up. Those black-eyed Susans really ate the sidewalk. I don't recommend that in a public space. And then this was September. Things started to die back. That's the Liatris dying back. But I chose to leave it up because I think it's beautiful. The Anise hyssop is in the upper left corner. That's the purple. So lots of different textures and colors. So September and then October, and this was in March. So it doesn't look that great now, but it is serving a function. Again, I see birds here all the time right now, coming and picking up seeds, taking nesting material. If you can leave it up as long as you can, do leave up your plants. I will cut this back in the next few weeks once it warms up and the native bees have been able to fly. Okay, another example. Like I said, this is my house from July 2022. I started small with the left side. So this is a shaded area. A lot of people have said, well, the one at your work is full sun. What do you do in shade or a smaller space? So this is probably September, October last year. It's a work in progress. I'm not claiming this is a beautiful garden, and it's much more of a mix of native and non-native. In this picture, what's really blooming are native asters, and the bees absolutely love them. What you can't see is that I actually have some shrubs in here that are very small, but again, I'm trying to layer that landscape. You can see the huge silver maple tree that came with the house, of course. And then you can see I have much smaller plants, but I need to put in some shrubs that let the birds come down from the bigger tree part way and then come down to the ground. I do have a water dish out there for birds to get water. And I have annuals next to the porch, and I plan to take out that really big green blob of a shrub and maybe put in a native shrub there. And so that corner where I want to replace that kind of green blob, that's something I've been thinking about. It's a tough location because you have a maple tree, which they have lots of surface roots that take all the water away. So it needs to be something that can compete with this tree. And of course, I also want it to provide benefit to birds. So maybe something that produces fruit. One thing that I did do, because this is a native plant garden, or I'd say half native plants, because you can see there are hostas in there. Again, I'm not a purist. I inherited a lot of plants when my mother died, and so I put her peonies in these gardens. There's nothing wrong with that. I do want more native plants to tie together, and again, like I said, provide homes for insects and then birds. But you also look down that street, you can see I am the first only person in this neighborhood to take out their front lawn. So I put in this edge to try and make it look a little bit more neat and tidy. I mulched the front bed. I have a lot of repetition in plants to try and let people know that this is a designed, intentional garden. It's not a weedy mess. I also have a little sign from the Xerces Society that says it's a native habitat garden. Sometimes you need to communicate with your neighbors when you make these changes. Okay, so when you're thinking about plants and you're coming up with a list, you're like, how do I start? I did want to recommend the audubon.org website, this native plants feature, as a useful tool for figuring out what plants can benefit what birds. So you can see you put in your email address and your zip code, and then it produces a list of plants that are native to your area, and it says it may attract these birds. That can be a really useful source of information. Let me check my time. Okay, so I have just a few minutes left. So one actually point that I forgot to make that I wanted to make, because I'm obviously speeding through this, is a cleanup in the spring. Again, think about how leaving things will benefit the birds and things that live, the insects and other invertebrates that live in your garden. A lot of times people will plant native plants and they think that they are less likely to be diseased or pests. And that's kind of a misconception or not fully thought through. Because we actually want them to have pests in a way, but I wouldn't call them pests. I would call the caterpillar eating the aster in my front yard. I would say that's terrific. That's exactly what I want. I want a caterpillar to be eating that plant so that a bird comes and eats that caterpillar. That's my goal. That's not a pest. That's actually a benefit. So if you decide to go with native plants and you see things eating your plants, other than maybe deer and rabbits and woodchucks, but if you see a caterpillar or, another kind of bug, there's nothing wrong with that, or potentially there's nothing. Don't rush to spray everything, because when you spray insecticides, you generally wipe out the good and the bad bugs. And then if you're wondering why you don't have birds, it's because you don't have bugs. And I've actually seen that happen in my own backyard. I was sitting on my back porch last spring, or maybe it was the spring before, and I saw a pair of chickadees come through, and they inspected the backyard. They went through my perennial border, and then they left. And I really think that they could see that I did not have enough native plants. I didn't have enough food for caterpillars that would sustain their nest. And so they left. So ever since then, my goal has been to have enough native plants that I can support, at least one family of chickadees, or maybe I'll get some wrens or something like that. I'm obviously in a very urban area. And there are no gardens nearby. And that's the thing, is if you start small and your neighbor starts small, it becomes like a corridor. Then suddenly these insects and these birds have places to come through, to move through and stick around. I also saw lots of orioles last spring, and they didn't stay because there wasn't habitat for them. They came through this neighborhood, they sang beautifully, they, stopped by feeders, and then they were gone because there wasn't a place for them. So my goal is to help people change their yards little by little. Again, I'm not a purist, but hopefully over time, enough will change that we'll be able to bring back these insects and birds. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to put up another survey that I'd love for you guys to take. So this one is for you to give me feedback. I'm going to see if I can copy my the link and put it in the chat. But if you can take this survey, let me see, I have to make sure I get the right one. Okay. And if you can take it really quickly, I'd really appreciate that. I'm still struggling to get my my URL. And then I'll move on to the next thing. So I'm bribing you, I'm making you take my survey before I move on.
So, Lindsey, if you don't mind, I actually had
Yes.
two little thoughts that I was
Oh,
hoping
yes,
to share as
absolutely.
well.
Go
So,
for it.
as a homeowner myself, something that I always try to keep in mind whenever I'm planning my own garden is how can I do it on a budget?
Yes.
And so, two things that some people might be aware of, some others might not. If you're looking to get plants, sometimes local plant exchanges, so like garden clubs, things like that, might do plant exchanges in the spring.
Right.
And so that could be a
So
great place.
yes, let me see. I deleted these slides, and I took it out. I had a list of local places to get plants. So
Oh,
I should share that. I should track it down. I guess maybe I'll stop screen sharing for a second. And because I know I have it in a different presentation. But I was worried about time, so I cut it.
okay.
But yes, absolutely. So plant exchanges, but be careful. That's the thing, is you want to make sure that you get exactly what you think you're getting.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to end up with an invasive species in your yard.
Yes.
But there are quite a few native nurseries now, and different organizations will do native plant sales. Especially right now, they're going on now. And the conservation districts often have plant sales as well.
My favorite is the Ann Arbor one. They have a plant sale, but
An
then they have
expo day.
yeah, they have an expo day where they just have like a whole barn full of different natives, and it's just like I'm like a
That's
giddy child when I go there.
okay. So this is my list. Um, oh, that's so funny that my well, there's my closed captioning coming on again. So see, it does actually work. That's pretty exciting. Okay, so I cannot endorse or recommend different nurseries or any products, but so these are just some that I came up with in Michigan. For the most part, Wild Type is probably the most well known. It's in Mason, and they do sell to a lot of local nurseries. So if you buy from Barson's, which is in Westland, they buy from Wild Type and then they grow on those plants. Some of the plant sales in the area, like Friends of the Rouge or Rochester Pollinators, they might buy from Wild Type and then resell them. Online, there are lots of seed sources. Again, be careful that you're getting something that's native, that you understand the definition of native. ISO plants I have not used, but it's an interesting concept. Basically you can buy wholesale amounts of plants in flats. So you can get a huge amount of plugs if that's what you need. And they ship them directly to your home. So that might be a really great resource in the future. I'm gonna see what else.
Yeah, and in the meantime, and the second thing that I was going to mention is wood chips. So what I've done in the past is I will contact a tree removal company, and a lot of times they'll have these trees that they cut down and they wood chipped, and they can actually, if you pay them like $20 or sometimes even less, they'll drop off a whole truckload of wood chips in your yard. And it's great because then you're not having to buy all these bags of mulch or that are in plastic bags. And so it's just a lot easier. It's nice. Um, and it saves you enormous amounts of money.
Right. So so there is a service called Chip Drop, and you can use Chip Drop to have wood chips dropped off. There are differing rates of success, so to speak, and the quality of the wood chips. You never know what you're going to get. You don't know when they're going to show up, and it's a massive amount. But if you are really trying to kill a large amount of grass, Chip Drop is a free, or you can pay a small amount, and it could be really helpful. I've done it before. I was going to share this resource since we have a little bit of time. MichiganFlora.net, I think is terrific. It's from the University of Michigan Herbarium. And so this is their main like landing page. The middle top, you can see search. So if you click on search, oh shoot. Okay, so I'm using too many different PowerPoints. Okay, so if you go to search, then you will have the ability to search by name and things like that. But the most important thing, I think, is that you can search by native and you can search by your county, and you can see what that search, just that simple search, check in the box native, and your county will tell you what native plants are from your county. And then you can do physiognomy. It's a weird word. I didn't know it before. But physiognomy is like the type of, or how the plant grows. Is it a tree? Is it a shrub? Is it a vine? Is it a form? So you can do Wayne County native trees and get a list of trees native to Wayne County. And then you can read those descriptions, dig deeper, decide what works for you. So I use that constantly when I am designing. And then these are some other resources that I want to share with people. So MichiganFlora.net is that website for the U of M Herbarium. The Audubon website for native plants. Wildflower.org is the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflowers Society is not the right word, center. And you can search for native plant lists in Michigan and get a lot of great information. Wild Ones is another nonprofit. They have chapters in Washtenaw County, and there's one in Wayne now. They have designs on their website to help you be inspired. Homegrown National Park is a really great resource. And then Dr. Jen Owen from MSU recommended this publication called Recommended Plantings for Migratory Songbird Habitat Management. And I have the link for that I can share. And so that talks about what berries have what nutrients that birds need. But again, that's only berries. Remember, birds also want seeds and they want insects. It just depends upon the type of bird and the time of year. What else? Oh, and then that's the end of my presentation. So does anybody have questions, or Brittany, do you have questions coming in?
We had someone ask for the info for the Ann Arbor Conservation District plant sale, and so I did put that in chat for
Okay,
anyone
great.
that was interested. Highly recommend it. They also have wonderful, not only normal plants, but they have shade grown plants. So like your spring ephemerals, which sometimes are really hard to find. They're the plants that you typically will find that flower for a very short period of time in forests or shady areas. And so they'll have some there, which are really, trust me, almost impossible to find locally. So great options. They have trees and shrubs as well that you can purchase. I can't advocate it for it enough. I love going. Arthur asks, what
Yeah.
EPA ecoregion is Michigan in?
So it depends upon how deep you kind of go with it. Let me see if I can find that slide again. So that's the thing, is Michigan is not in just one ecoregion. And let me see if I can bring up the website and share that, because we're not in one ecoregion. You know, it's a pretty diverse state. So let me see if I can. Oh, that's a PDF. I don't want that. So I need to go to the EPA website and track this back while we're talking. So while I'm looking at the internet and talking at the same time. Okay, is there such thing as a native annual? Yes. I am not as familiar with them. But there are different, well, yeah, there's a bunch of annuals. Sometimes we see them as weeds. And that's the thing, is learning what is a native. People consider native plants weeds. Once you start to get to know native plants and their benefits, you realize, oh, what I thought was a weed, now I no longer think is a weed. You know, my grandma might consider it a weed, but I now like it. One of my favorite weeds is a type of fleabane, or erigeron is the scientific name. And I could probably find a picture on my computer, but it is just a super cute little white kind of daisy with, here, and I'm going to type it in. So it has soft little petals. They kind of turn from white to pink. And, you know, I pulled it out for 25 years. And then I finally realized it was a native plant and I liked it. And so I would encourage it. So yes, there are native annuals. So I'm going to share my screen once I zoom in on this map.
And in the meantime, Christy asked, is this webinar available to watch again online? It is being recorded, and we will make it available to not only everyone that registered, but we'll also post it on the Detroit Bird Alliance website. So, and then I'll share it with Lindsey as well, so she can share it with anyone that asked for it from Lindsey.
And if you take the evaluation, if you do that evaluation that I shared, and I could bring that back up again, please give me feedback. Please give Brittany feedback. I really am speeding through this and sharing way too much information. So if people are interested, I could break it down more, and instead of 1 hour, I could do you know, more sessions, more in depth if people are interested. So this is the ecoregions. You can see that, right, Brittany?
Yeah.
Okay, of North America. So you can see part of Michigan is in 8, the Eastern Temperate Forests, and then the UP is in the Northern Forests. So this is level 1. And so the other map that I had shared is the level 3. So it's taking the ecoregions and breaking them down to be much more specific. And so I would say at least start with this level 1 and get plants for your ecoregion based on that. But if you want to go even deeper, go to level 3. And the thing about that is that it will help you also be more successful as a gardener if you understand when you understand your ecoregion, then you understand what soil you have, and different things about climate, things like that. So somebody gave, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Latin name of that plant, Erica. But she put a native annual in a few Michigan counties in the chat. So if you were to go to the michiganflora.net website, I'm going to type that in. You can search for, partridge bee, yes, okay. So you can search by annual or perennial, and you can find the native annuals for your area. But a lot of them are not what we consider attractive. So I always hope that people can kind of start changing the definition of what is beautiful and recognizing that the fact that it's a host for insects that feed our chickadees is beautiful in its own way. It doesn't just have to be a picture perfect flower. All of those other things it contributes is beautiful as well.
Any other questions from anybody? One thing I always appreciate, I guess it's something also to think about, is levels are great. For me, I actually am a big proponent for shrubs. I love shrubs. I think it's like the perfect balance between a tree and a flower. And there are lots of different heights. So like you can get a shrub that could get 15 or 20 feet tall, or you can get a shrub that's 3 or 4 feet tall. And it's this perfect balance of you can enjoy all the benefits, or some of the benefits of a tree, but maybe it's significantly smaller. So if you have a smaller yard, it might fit in better. And so it's something to think about. And so for me, I have shrubs lining my property that are 2 feet tall because they're small. You don't have to pay $50 to get a 4-foot tall shrub. You can buy them from conservation districts that are maybe they're a foot tall, and you get them for $10. And so you can buy huge portion, large amount of them for really cheap, but you do have to keep track of the fact that deer and rabbits are going to chomp them down to the ground, which is a
Yes.
constant battle.
Yeah, the other wildlife, the herbivores, are often a battle, especially in the more rural areas. But even I have rabbits because they have no predators here. Chicken wire is often your friend for protecting small plants. And the other thing is, so Brittany was talking about shrubs, and when you stand in, like, say, your backyard, think about what your neighbors' yards might have to offer. Like, I have that huge silver maple in a neighbor's backyard. And so then I have shrubs nearby. So those will grow up, so to say 10 feet. And then I have perennials nearby. So my neighbors are helping share some of that layering of the landscape. It doesn't all have to be in your tiny area. And again, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do all of this. Adding a few native plants, anything is better than nothing. And hopefully lots more people take this on. And then we create, like I said, kind of a movement or a corridor.
Yeah. Something I always kind of encourage people to think about is your odd spaces, so your unused spaces in your garden. So maybe it's a corner of a garden that's really annoying to mow.
Yes.
Like I always encourage them to think about those places that are a bit more of a hassle. And so why not dig up or not dig up necessarily, but replace the grass with a small garden. And then maybe you expand it the next year to twice the size. Or maybe you have trees that are a foot or two from your fence, and instead of mowing around these trees, you have a garden that goes along the fence line. And so think about those areas that are a bit more of a hassle as a starting point. And then once you get comfortable with that, you think of somewhere new.
Yeah, yeah, and the starting small and leaving the leaves and using leaves as like the mulch around those trees maybe that you have. If you need to remove the leaves from your lawn in the fall, piling them, or not piling isn't the right word, but raking them over and using them around like to make tree circles and things like that. Because all those invertebrates hiding in the leaves, are important. Um, Even spider webs and things like that. Ruby-throated hummingbirds, they use spider webs to make their nests. We need all of those guys, even if we don't like them, they're very important to the food chain.
Yeah.
So I did post my evaluation link again in the chat, and you'll notice a lot of questions about pollinators, and you can feel free to just say, either yes or no, depending upon how you interpret that. What do you think of moth nests in your walnut tree? Is it okay to leave them? I'm not sure what you mean by nests. If you mean the webs, then yes, I would think that they're okay to leave.
So I can talk on that a little bit more. So something to think about. There are some invasive species that sometimes some moths that are not good that can cause diseases or cause problems for local trees. So I would say if you have a large amount of them in a tree, maybe contact like the local DNR, see or do some research into what type of moth it is, because that could dictate whether or not it's good or bad.
Right.
And so, okay. So yeah, that's something to think about. There are some species of moth that can be considered bad for trees. And so it's not necessarily a straight answer. It would largely depend on what type it is.
Right. And the webs that are left now don't do anything. But if you see in it, so I included a link for spongy moth. It used to be called gypsy moth, in the chat. And so if you see their egg masses, this is definitely the time to remove those egg masses. But those are going to be on the trunk. That isn't the webbing that you see in the tree. But another thing, I need to put something else in the chat really quick. Okay, so Ask Extension is one of the best kept secrets. I tell people to use it all the time. So if you need an identification on that species of caterpillar or moth, you can send pictures, upload pictures through Ask Extension and ask for help identifying them and what you should do. And somebody at Michigan State University should get back to you within 3 business days. We have a group of volunteers that help with this, as well as scientists at the university level. Sometimes I answer questions too. So it's a great resource. It's completely free to people in Michigan.
And for anyone, for when this is recorded, just because they won't be able to see the chat, that is HTTPS. I always forget, it's like not the
colon / ask the number 2 extension.org. But the thing is, if you Google Ask Extension, it's going to pop up. It's the first thing.
Okay.
Or Ask Extension MSU, it'll show up. So,
and then we
it's a
had
great
one
resource.
we had one other question from Arthur. I know we're over time, but you mentioned at the beginning talking more about spiders. Anything quick to share on them?
Arthur, I wish I knew more about spiders, but I could send you an amazing talk about spiders that I watched from a different organization. So they are absolutely fascinating. And they're very good, and they can be very cute too when you look at them up close. So don't kill your spiders. They're all useful.
Well, it is 7:05. We probably could handle maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If anyone wants to leave, they're more than welcome to. We can answer a few more, but otherwise, if not, we can also conclude and hope if you have any questions, you can always feel free to email either myself or Lindsey, and we can always answer questions later.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, doesn't look like we have any more questions. So
Have a good night, everybody. Have a good night, Brittany.
yeah, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be posting the recorded webinar here shortly.